In this video, I want to do my best to explain what I think is one of Christianity's dirty secrets that most Christians don't really seem aware of. There's a serious mismatch between what Christianity thinks it is and what Christianity actually is. And I think once you see it, it will help you understand a lot of what happens in Christianity. And the thing that I see, because people frequently say to me, you can't be a Christian because you don't believe X, Y, or Z. So I want to explain a little bit about how I think about this as somebody who is trained as a religion scholar. I think once you see this, it kind of changes the way that you relate to Christianity. So here's what I want to talk about. I want to start with a story. So when I was young, I knew that there was an emphasis on the fact that I needed to have a conversion experience. I was raised evangelical. So some of you might have been baptized as babies. A lot of us raised in evangelical households. You're born into an evangelical family, but then you're kind of pressured to have this conversion experience where you admit that you're a sinner and ask Jesus into your heart. So we have this kind of very specific ritualized moment of salvation that a lot of evangelicals would recognize. And I think because so many churches have this kind of conversation about conversion, so many churches have this kind of view of conversion, we understand conversion as these types of moments. And different churches have different ways to structure this. But we could think about Pentecostals insisting that you're baptized in the Spirit, or certain evangelical churches I went to that said I wasn't saved because I kind of prayed wrong and I needed to believe something different or pray a slightly different prayer, or I hadn't confessed it the right way or whatever. There was this constant anxiety about what actually constitutes a conversion experience. And I think if I look at Christianity, stepping outside and looking at it as a religious movement, I think one of the fundamental reasons for this is that there's a serious mismatch between what Christianity thinks it is and what Christianity actually is. So Christianity functionally operates, for many of us, like a hereditary religion. We're born into it. But Christianity, on an ideological level or mythological level, for many of us, functioned as a conversion religion. And even though most people aren't really converted to Christianity in any real sense, we have to manufacture conversion. So a lot of Christian groups, if you look at what we actually do, we have to manufacture different rituals around conversion. So for me as a kid, that meant asking Jesus into my heart. And it was real. I'm not saying it didn't happen. It was real to me. It was important to me. Different, I talked about baptism in the Spirit, different groups have different ways to manufacture this. But the fundamental problem is when you have a religion that people generally actually join by being born into it or born into a culture that has it, we need to feel like we chose it. We need to feel like we had this moment of conversion to it because of our mythology. And if you look at right back to the New Testament, this is an important sort of mythological element of how you join Christianity. You are converted to it. So what do you do in a culture where most people, the vast majority of people who join it are born into it? You tell stories about conversion and you manufacture it. So this follows on an idea that permeates a lot of Christian communities, that faith isn't authentic unless you choose it. And what happens if you look at the history of Christianity, especially the history of Protestantism, is a lot of Protestantism and a lot of Protestant denominations have excessively focused on new ways to feel like you're choosing something. New ways to create this sense of conversion. And it might be that second adult baptism you have because the infant baptism didn't count, might be new Spirit fillings, might be rededication services. These are the fundamental acts of a religion that's actually confused about what it is. Now, when I talk about staying Christian, I get a lot of flack, and a lot of people are you can't be Christian because you don't have X beliefs and you question X beliefs, all the things that they think are important to stay Christian. And I could push back on any of those and I could say we all have different definitions of what it is to be a Christian, and that's fine. There are a lot of different ways to be Christian, fair. But fundamentally, I think the one thing that we need to be able to say that we don't really know how to say is that we're born a Christian. Because if I say I was born Christian, if you're Jewish or probably Muslim, I think this would be true too. If you're a different religion, you probably see yourself as just being born into it. But Christianity has this weird complex that you can't just be born into it. You have to choose it for it to be real. So when I, as a 6 or 7-year-old, made the decision to pray and ask Jesus into my heart, that was the moment that made it real to me. But it was I was never going to be a Hare Krishna. That was always going to be my religion because I was socialized into it. I had parents telling me it was the truth. I had all of these factors kind of coalesced that made me choose evangelical Christianity. Now, different people have different experiences, and it's notorious for Christian kids to kind of struggle with this because we grow up in the church and we don't always feel that sense of urgency around conversion or that sense of a switch of direction that sometimes maybe our parents felt, especially if they converted out of often other denominations of Christianity. Like they didn't actually change religions, but they went through these sort of manufactured conversion experiences that made them feel like they were changing religions or made them feel that they were joining Christianity for the first time. But like the reason we believe things, for most of us who are Christian, the reason we have Christian beliefs is because we're born Christian. We're born into a Christian, maybe family or society. You go to a church, like it socializes you. It tells you what to think about God. It tells you all of these things. There's a reason why when you hear gospel stories, you are like, okay, that makes sense. Like feeding the 5,000. Okay, that happened. A lot of us don't really ask these questions because they're part of our culture for many of us. And we don't really stop and question them in the same way that we do question other things, because Christianity is not something we chose. And when it comes to having a complicated relationship to Christianity, I think a lot of people have this idea that like you either choose it, or if you, at some point you regret that choice, you take it back and like then you choose not to be a Christian anymore. But it's hard to actually say because of the way we mythologize conversion, is that it's okay to be born Christian. The reality is that we imagine these moments of early Christianity as being these points of decision, and maybe they were, but for many, many Christians throughout history, Christianity has been hereditary. It's been a religion that we are in because we are born into, and that's okay. That's a legitimate reason to belong to a religion. The thing is, I think we have this idea that if you're born into something, it's not real, that like if you're just socialized into Christianity, then it's not the real thing. But I would argue that's actually all we have. That's all any conversion experience is. We're socialized and we're taught to have conversion experiences just as we're taught to be Christian. And if you recognize that your religious identity comes from socialization, comes from being born into Christianity, that's not a bad thing. It's just a different mechanism. And fundamentally, it doesn't mean you're not a Christian, especially if you want to identify as a Christian in some way. It means that the way that we've constructed Christianity doesn't really make sense. It doesn't actually reflect reality, because that's not actually how people become Christians. And the anxiety, even among people who like still consider themselves Christians in the world that I came from, the anxiety around not having a good enough conversion experience, not doing all this stuff right, praying the right prayer, having the right baptism by the Spirit, whatever, that kind of anxiety is really hard on people. And fundamentally, I think it fights against the type of Christianity we actually want to have, which is that people can, this is what I want to have, is that people can belong. You don't have to have that constant anxiety about whether you're in or out. Like you can just be, and that's okay. It could be part of who you are. You could be born a Christian, and that's fine. It could be that Christianity has been asking you to perform this conversion experience that you don't actually need. You can be born into a tradition and shaped by that tradition without needing some kind of elaborate constructed conversion experience to make it real. But whether or not you chose Christianity in this like dramatic come to Jesus moment, it doesn't mean you can't belong here. That really has nothing to do with anything. For me, Christianity, these are my people. This is my language for the sacred. And I'm staying a Christian, and I'm still a Christian. And one of the things I've come to realize as I get older, which is really hard for an ex-evangelical to say, but I was born Christian. That's why it's my tradition. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.